Give me the money! Where's the money? Where's the money? Good God, all this disrespect. No, I hope my wife doesn't hear. I need Dangerfield. Rutledge! Rutledge! Did you say college classic campus? Well, sure you did. I heard you screaming, Mama! Just saw college classic campuses. Put a gun up to my head. College classic campuses isn't dead. Okay, all right. Living in Baltimore, he noticed the difference in the treatment of city slaves. You see, in the country, they slave them to death, right? And so it was a little different. They got a more upright, a more general idea about what good life is about. So it's embarrassing to smack your slaves around in public. You know, in the country, right? You go, what'd the slave do? But really what they want to say is, you don't have to hit him in front of us. Right? You go up to him, come here, you like Joe Pesci stabbing him up with a knife. Got some pin in his hand, right? One of those real fancy pins. He starts stabbing up his slave. I told you never to do that in public. They don't. They can't practice that in New York. Everybody's dressed up nice. Blood get all over the place. They got slave blood all over me. Nigga blood. They were better fed and clothed than those on the plantation. No white city man wanted to be publicly known as a cruel slave master, or at least most of them did not want such a reputation. Although across from the Alds lived a man, Mr. Thomas Hamilton, and his wife, the owners of 2 female slaves, Henrietta, about 22 years old, and Mary, about 14. These 2 were always starved. Always. They probably wanted them real skinny and stuff, like skinny women. But they were always starved. Always with festering sores and ugly scars from constant whippings and beatings. Mostly administered by Mrs. Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton, she didn't want Mr. Hamilton to, you know, they were taking the slaves, you know. He probably had children with them and everything, sent them away. He sold the children slaves, you know. They came out, well, they look kind of Latin, kind of Asian, kind of black. They're not mine, though. They're not mine, I tell you. I sent them away. Miss Hamilton beating them on the side. I told you to leave Mr. Hamilton alone. Come here, Joe Pesci. I tell you. Pay. We carried a whip wherever she went. She was angry. She's probably overweight. Mary so starved that she looked years younger than she was, used to fight with the pigs for a waffle thrown into the street. Come here. Oh my God, help me. What am I doing? Reminds me of a pastor once who grabbed me by the arm. Lord, what have I done? I go, Pastor, let me go. I've done nothing wrong. Oh, Lord, heavens me. Frederick did go back to the plantation at about 9 or 10 years of age. His old master, Captain Anthony, had died, and the estate had to be shared between his children. This meant that Frederick had to be present to be counted along with the other property. Men and women, old and young, married and single, 29 individuals in all were ranked with horses, sheep, and swine. After the evaluation came to the division, of course a slave had no voice whatsoever in any decision as to who would get him or her. But they lined up. Men went around taking notes or assessing the flock of slaves to be worth about $2,800. This had to be shared between the 3 heirs. So the slaves were divided into 3 lots, each of a value of approximately $935. Wow. Manhood lost in chattelhood. Frederick said about this ultimate inhuman degradation taking place on October 18, 1927, trembling with fear that he would fall into the hands of Anthony's son Andrew, a cruel drunkard. Frederick was greatly relieved when he was included in the portion of Lucretia and Thomas Auld, and was sent back to Baltimore to the family of Master Hugh. Around the same time, Lucretia died, and Frederick found out what had happened to his grandmother Betsy, who had served her master faithfully. She had peopled his plantation with slaves. She had 12 children and at least 25 grandchildren, and had become a great grandmother in his service, rocking the master himself in infancy, working hard during his adult life, and had even closed his eyes when he died. But she remained a slave, now an old slave in the hands of people she did not know. She saw all her children, grandmother and great-grandchildren, she be divided and sold off. The present owners, strangers to her, deemed her too old to be of any use, so they left her deep in the woods, in a primitive hut with a small mud chimney to fend for herself. A very old woman, her body racked with pain, immobility taking over her once so active limbs, dying a slow death, all alone in the wilderness, as everyone was gone, sold and gone, as the slaves used to sing, left alone to suffer and die. Interesting, very interesting book. Hugh's family, about 7 years, he succeeded in learning to read and write without any assistance. After the very first period, Mistress Sophia had complied with her husband's wishes to the letter. Being a naive, kind soul, it had at first seemed natural to her to treat the boy just like another human being. Slowly she was instructed to behave differently. Slavery proved as injurious to her as it did to me, said Frederick Douglass, who saw a warm, compassionate woman change into a hard, angry person. If she saw Frederick even looking at a newspaper, she would snatch it away from him furiously. She kept close watch on him. If he stayed alone too long, she came running to check that he was not looking in a book. But the boy, by nature endowed with a charming personality, made friends with white boys he met in the street. He converted each one of them into a teacher. When he was set on errands, he snuck along any piece of reading he could find, and by hurrying he found time to stop, talk to boys, to learn a little each time. It helped that he was well fed in the old household and able to put bread in his pocket when he went out. This he gave to white boys, many of whom were hungry street urchins. These boys would even talk about slavery with him, expressing lively sympathy with his plight. He scourged and scoured the gutters and retrieved miscellaneous papers, including pages of the Bible, which he cleaned, dried, and studied. This is College Classic Campus Hits. We're reading and we're learning and we're finding out about slavery. And in Riverside County, we see a lot of that here. We see that in Paris, where the man was slaving his own children. And there's a lot of that going on here. I think that police are familiar and investigators are familiar with it, but I think very little is done about it because it's an open place. A lot harder to be nosy here and a lot harder to not be nosy here. But to get involved is another thing. Some people value their lives more than they value other people's lives and their freedom. This is College Classic Campus. God bless you.